If you're an evangelical who believes in faith alone, I'm going to change your mind today. I'm not going to convince you that faith alone itself is wrong, but that it doesn't mean what you think it means. And I'm not going to do this by rehashing tired, endless arguments from biblical interpretation, but by showing you firsthand that you simply can't be correct. Catholic Christians and non-denominational evangelicals have been arguing over the role of works in salvation for hundreds of years. Evangelicals claim, on the one hand, to believe in faith alone or sola fide, and on the other, they like to say Catholics believe in a works-based salvation, which, if true, would nullify Christ's sacrifice. This disagreement hinges on a short passage in James 2, especially verse 24. For reference, here's what James 2:24 actually says. You see that a man is justified by works and not by faith alone. This seems pretty clear-cut, so what's the issue? Well, let's let Mike Winger lay it out.
This is the topic of whether or not Christians are saved by faith alone, specifically what the Bible teaches in regards to James chapter 2, because that is the key battleground, I think, a lot of times in the conversation on this particular issue. So, in every battle, in every war, there are certain battlegrounds, like D-Day, Normandy. There are certain moments, certain places where even though the war is big, the war has all these fronts and different things going on, this front, this issue, this thing determines what happens in the war long term. Like, this is the key turning point for the battle. And in theology, in the question of justification by faith alone, the battleground, one of the major battlegrounds, is James chapter 2. James chapter 2. That's what it is. So, this is where we're really going to find a separation between the biblical Christian view. But on the other side, you're going to have Catholicism, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, and just about every single other religious group out there will all agree on the opposite side of where I'll be today.
Oh, that was well put, Mike. Now, I'm not going to get wrapped up in the endless debate over whether or not James 2 means what it says. If you're an evangelical, then it doesn't mean what it seems to say. If you're a Catholic or one of a certain flavor Protestant, then it means what it seems to say. So, if we're being honest, then probably no one is going to change your mind on how to interpret this passage because you're going to read it consistent with your assumptions. And to be fair, interpreting the Bible can be difficult, so I'm not saying that Catholics are automatically right just because they accept this verse at face value. So for the sake of argument, let's just assume that evangelicals are correct, and James 2 does not mean what it seems to mean. The history of Protestantism in James 2 is pretty interesting. Back during the Reformation, Martin Luther famously called James an epistle of straw, probably because it seemed to contradict his doctrine of faith alone. Some people say that Martin Luther wanted James and other books removed from the canon, but this may not be true. Either way, modern evangelicals themselves remove James from the Bible by other means, namely by reinterpreting the book to the point where it loses all meaning. Let's take a look at some examples.
Faith is still the issue, but how do you prove that there's faith? James rejects the idea that this is an issue between am I saved by faith or saved by works? He goes, no, it's by faith, but is the faith real? I mean, God sees your faith, you're saved, but how do I show you my faith? So then he sarcastically says, show me your faith without works. Well, I can't show you my faith without works. The only way to demonstrate what I believe is by how I live. So, verse 18. Let me read it to you again. I hope you caught it. I hope I explained that well. There's a reason why people get it so misunderstood. So someone will say, you have faith, and I, James, has works. Show me your faith apart from your works. Ha ha ha. That's the gotcha question. And he says, and I will show you my faith by my works. So faith is the issue, not works, but works is how you demonstrate the faith.
You see verse 24, that man is justified by works and not faith alone. This justified here is not talking about he's justified by works for salvation, but it demonstrates that works demonstrate that he is truly a man who is justified by the Lord, and his works reflect what's going on in his life to the people around him.
But in James 2, a verse often cited against faith alone is verse 24. It says this, you see that a person is justified by works and not by faith alone. Justified before whom? The passage doesn't indicate that it's before God that we get justified by works. God knows if a person believes without having to see works first, and he's just affirmed that Abraham was declared righteous purely on the basis of believing. But from the context of James 2, this verse indicates that it's justification before people.
So the gist of the evangelical argument is that James is teaching that our works justify us before other men, not that our works justify us before God. But is this actually true? Instead of getting caught up in the debate over interpretation, why don't we just assume evangelicals like Mike Winger are correct? And let's actually see how this works with a real example. Let's pick someone who we could say is justified before men at random, just any old person, like say Ravi Zacharias. Ravi Zacharias had a massive ministry for many decades that spanned the globe. He's preached, written books, and is probably responsible for the conversion of thousands. Seems to me like he's justified before men. There's just one issue. Shortly after his death, it came out that he allegedly was involved in extremely immoral behavior, to put it mildly. Using his status as a man of God, he allegedly did many vile things for many years. I won't recount here what happened. You can look it up for yourself. But what he is alleged to have done is pure evil. So now the rubber has hit the road. Let's revisit Mike Winger and see what it looks like for someone to be justified before men.
I think this is the most miserable video I've ever had to make. And I hate this video. And I'm telling you guys right now, it's going to be ugly and unpleasant. And this isn't like me trying to shock you into watching the video. To protect her identity, sorry. To protect her identity, this report does not disclose many of the details she shared with us. Some information is related below because aspects of Mr. Zacharias' behavior towards this witness were similar to his conduct with other therapists. Specifically, the use of ministry funds to provide financial support, the effort to elicit personal information about a difficult past, and Mr. Zacharias' use of religious language during their encounters. You're going to get more about all these details coming.
If this is what being justified before men can look like, then what are we even talking about here? Do we really think James spent an entire chapter of his epistle telling us how to be justified before men, only for us to forget that the heart of men is wicked and deceitful above all things and can't be known? Jesus tells us not to even let our left hand know what our right hand is doing. But then, on the other hand, James wants us to understand the importance of justifying ourselves before men. Ravi Zacharias was justified to many other men, but that justification was literally used to hurt people. In the end, him being justified before others meant less than nothing, because the only justification that means anything at all is our justification before God. I think this is something we all know, but we get sidetracked by our assumptions or our traditions. I really want to pick on Mike here, by the way. It's honestly heartbreaking even just to see someone have to learn about what happened. But Ravi Zacharias shows us that it's one thing to say that James is teaching us the importance of being justified before men, and another to see what that can actually look like in real life. I think it's clear. Justification before men just isn't the kind of justification we should be concerned about, or that James would even be concerned with teaching us. All right, but surely Catholics can't be right. There's no way we can add works to Christ's sacrifice, right? Well, what do Catholics actually believe? Let's look, for instance, at the infamous Council of Trent, Session 6, Canon 1. If anyone saith that man may be justified before God by his own works, whether done through the teaching of human nature or that of the law, without the grace of God through Jesus Christ, let him be anathema. No less than 3 times, including at the Council of Trent, Pelagius was condemned for teaching that by being sinless and working for our salvation on our own, we can be saved. The fact is, Catholicism doesn't teach that our own works save us. God is the source and primary cause, not just of any works that we do, but even our faith, through grace. Nothing we do in ourselves will impress God or obligate him to owe us anything. We are not saved by our own works. Rather, God does his works through us. Our sole job is not to turn our back on him. So, evangelicals are wrong, not just about James, but about what the Catholic Church teaches. If James 2 means we are justified to God by our works, then you owe it to yourself to understand what that really means. And you'll find the fullness of that truth not in forcing Scripture to fit a preconceived doctrine, but in the Catholic Church. Evangelicals are correct about one thing. You can't do your own work for your salvation. But they are wrong that works are just a natural result of being saved and merely justify us before men. But now that I've convinced you of the Catholic position, all hope isn't lost. Even if evangelicals are right and works are the result of faith, then if you don't work, you aren't saved, logically and necessarily. So, in a different way, evangelicals still agree that works are necessary for salvation, even if works don't cause salvation. So we're really just taking different roads to the same destination anyway, which means there's really nothing to fear in the Catholic position. It's time for this needless debate to end.
And I know, many of you guys know too, when you encounter somebody who has empty faith or dead faith, it is incredibly difficult to get them to realize it. Like, how often and how easily will they admit that? I mean, James has obviously interacted with these people too, and the Holy Spirit knew this text was needed because it keeps backing them into a corner. This isn't about salvation by works, but show me your faith without works. And I'm telling you, if you have faith without works, you got dead faith, and you're not saved. Whoa, but I believe, James, I believe. And he goes, that's great. So do the demons. It is hard to shake people out of this sort of self-deceived thing. That's why he earlier said that if you're a hearer of the word but not a doer, you deceive yourself. Like, you really don't know what's going on. You don't even realize you're not saved. You're not saved.